Hey guys, and welcome to October's House, the place where we talk all TV, cinema, and horror. Now today on the channel I wanted to do something different and something that I haven't done before, and that's an iceberg video. I don't think iceberg videos are as popular as they were a while back, but I still really enjoy watching them, and I really wanted to do one. And on top of that, Scream is my favourite franchise of all time. I love it, and I really wanted to do a video on it because I haven't talked about it on the channel as of yet, aside from a tiny little news update on the CinemaCon video. So why not kill two birds with one stone and do a Scream iceberg video? I hate it when people explain what an iceberg is at the start of iceberg videos, but it would feel wrong if I didn't, and I do feel obliged to do it, so I'm going to give a brief explanation. An iceberg chart is a chart of information and facts about a certain topic or subject, with the most well-known stuff being right at the top, at the tip of the iceberg, and then the most obscure facts being right at the bottom of the ocean floor. So in this video, I'll be going through each entry on the Scream iceberg, giving an explanation of what exactly they mean and some context behind it. This is going to be quite a long video, so go grab a drink, go grab some snacks, settle in, and just enjoy this one, and hopefully you'll learn some new information along the way. So the original iceberg I found on the Scream subreddit. It was posted by a user called FlashyBange220, I think. So because this was posted 4 years ago, I did kind of rebuild the chart from the ground up. I kept all the original entries, but I updated anything that needed updating, and I also added some things that I thought were missing or needed to be talked about as well. So before we move on, this is your obvious spoiler warning. I'm going to be going pretty in depth with the franchise. I'm not going to be shying away from spoilers. We're going to be talking about fan theories, everything. So if you haven't seen Scream for some insane reason, go watch it, go watch all 6 entries, watch the TV show, and then come back. So, let's get into it. Okay, so we're starting off with the top tier, which is the sky. And we're going to start with Dead by Daylight, and we're also going to group Mortal Kombat into this one. Both of these games have collabed with Scream and have Ghostface as playable characters. The Mortal Kombat fatality for Ghostface is particularly iconic. The mask is obviously referring to the Ghostface mask. It's a very iconic mask, and most people will recognize it even if they haven't seen the movie. It's pretty widely available to buy. It's not hard to find at all. It's actually made by a company called Fun World, where the movie actually found the mask and used it for the movie, but we'll get into that later. Scary Movie is a spoof parody film by the Wayans brothers from 2000s. It mainly parodies Scream in the first film. I would go as far to say that probably people know more about Scary Movie than they do Scream. Not to say that Scream was not popular by any means, but you know, Scary Movie was a massive hit. It hit a wider demographic and a wider audience as well, and I think people have a lot of love for it, and I do think that people learned about Scream from Scary Movie. The 2 killers in the video club, I do think this is a typo, and I do think it means video store, which is referring to one of the most notable scenes in the first Scream, where Randy, Billy, and Stu are having a conversation about the killers in the video store. Obviously, Stu and Billy are the killers, so yes, the killers were in the video store. A Ghostface stalks Tatum. So obviously Tatum is a really big character in Scream. She has an amazing death scene, getting stuck in a cat flap in a garage door. Iconic. She's also in a relationship with Stu. She's very close with Sydney, so she's going to be around Billy a lot. So, you know, it's pretty obvious that Billy and Stu were keeping tabs on her throughout the movie. But I do think that this entry is specifically referring to a deleted scene where Sydney and Tatum are in a supermarket, and you can see Ghostface reflected in a glass door, and then you can see Ghostface again when they're getting into their car, and that scene shows us directly that Ghostface was following Tatum and Sydney. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next tier, which is the tip of the iceberg. Scream 7. So Scream 7 is the next entry in the franchise, and it is slated for release on the 27th of February 2026. Honestly, this rollout has been absolutely insane. From Melissa Barrera getting fired, to Jenna Ortega leaving, and then Christopher Landon stepping down, and then Kevin Williamson taking over as director. And the absolute slew of insane casting announcements like Matthew Lillard and Scott Foley. We also have some newcomers like Isabel May and Asa Gurman and McKenna Grace, which I'm really excited about. I think whatever we're thinking this movie is, it's not that. I genuinely don't know what they're doing. I've had so many theories. I just think it's going to be absolutely insane. It was all planned. I think this is referring to the fact that in Scream 3, Roman Bridges gets revealed to be Sydney's brother and planned her mother's murder with Billy and Stu, thus setting off the entire franchise. I think it just kind of is referring to the fact that Roman planned the entire thing. The Gainesville Ripper. So the Gainesville Ripper was a serial killer that was active in 1990 in Florida. He killed 5 college students. I don't want to give too much time to an actual serial killer because he's a piece of shit, but ultimately inspired the first movie. Dewey was supposed to be the 3rd killer. I don't think this is true at all. I tried searching for some confirmation to see whether this was maybe confirmed as a plot point in an early draft of the script, but I couldn't, so I do think this is referring to just the fan theory that Dewey was one of the killers in the first film, or in the second and third. I think this just isn't true. I do think that there may be some evidence there, but I think it's more red herrings than anything else. Sydney will become the killer. So this is a fan theory that has floated around forever. As long as I've been a fan of the franchise, this has kind of been talked about a lot. This is referring to the fan theory that Sydney will at some point in the franchise don the mask and become Ghostface due to all the trauma that she's endured over the years. This is even referred to in Scream 6, where Gale is on the phone to Ghostface, and Ghostface talks about how it wouldn't make sense for Sydney to be Ghostface. It hasn't happened yet. I don't think it'll happen, but never say never. Opening kills are always relevant actors. So Scream has a habit of casting big names that are relevant at the time and using them pretty heavily in the promo and then killing them off in the opening kill. I love this tradition, and I was only 1 year old when the first movie came out, so obviously I wasn't there to experience it firsthand, but I've been told by fans and just read online how insane it was to cast Drew Barrymore and then just kill her off in the opening. It's so iconic, and it triggered a tradition that spans the entire franchise. In order, we have Drew Barrymore, Jada Pinkett, Liev Schreiber, Anna Paquin, Kristen Bell, Jenna Ortega, Samara Weaving, and there's a few others here and there as well. Obviously, there is some leeway. Anna Paquin and Kristen Bell were fake outs in Scream 4. Jenna Ortega didn't actually die in Scream 5, but was the opening sequence. And then Liev Schreiber was more relevant to the franchise itself rather than in pop culture. But it is a very consistent tradition, and I do think that it gives us good ground to predict that McKenna Grace is going to be the opening kill in Scream 7, unfortunately. Stu is alive. So this is a very, very, very prevalent theory on the internet. It's very divisive in the fandom. It's insane, honestly. Some people swear by it and will not take no for an answer, and then others absolutely detest this theory. I've never seen a theory so divisive as Stu lives theory. The theory goes that Stu Macher actually survived the first movie, and his rich parents paid off who they needed to pay off for him to fake his death and go into hiding. Okay, so I just want to jump in and mention something that I forgot to mention while filming. But as of Scream 6, this is actually a theory within universe now. So Mindy and Kirby have a conversation in the shrine room, and basically Mindy says that there are people out there that believe that Stu Macher is actually alive and faked his death. In Scream 5, we also get a tiny Easter egg that I quickly mentioned somewhere in the iceberg. But yeah, in Scream 6, it's directly referenced. And by extension, there's the cult of Ghostface theory, which states that Stu has been orchestrating all of the killings over the franchise since the first one from behind the scenes. As I said, it's very divisive. Some people absolutely swear by this, other people don't believe it at all. But I do think the most damning piece of evidence for this is that Scream 3 was supposed to be exactly that. And we will touch on that a little bit more in a later entry. I honestly think that this theory warrants its own entire video. But having said that, there's literally hundreds of Stu Lives videos all over the internet. So yeah. Meta commentary. So Scream is known and built upon its meta commentary. Every film uses its format and plot to touch upon something that's relevant in the world of horror and the wider world of media. You could argue that this should be in the top just because it's fairly obvious. Having said that, I think a lot of casual viewers do miss the points that they try to make a lot of the time. So while I do think that the commentaries are surface level, I do think that they're easily overlooked. Scream is obviously a commentary on horror movies, specifically slashers, and how the media was sensationalizing the idea that they make people violent. Scream 2 is a continuation of this, zoning in on sequels and the impact of real-life violence inspiring horror movies. Scream 3 plays on the tropes of trilogies and goes a little bit into the darker sides of Hollywood, which we will touch on in a later entry. Scream 4 hits remakes, and I don't think this one lands as well as some of the others do, but it also comments on social media, the rise of kind of internet fame and infamy. Arguably that was quite ahead of its time. Scream 5 does requels and legacy sequels, which I think lands a lot better than Scream 4's attempt at commenting on remakes. It also touches on toxic fandoms and extreme fandom. I think that Amber's delivery of the line "I was radicalized" is one of the best in the entire franchise. Scream 6 takes this a little further and goes into franchises and also goes into online infamy and a little bit of cancel culture. I do think as the series goes on and evolves, I think it stops referencing horror in general so heavily and starts referencing itself more. Sam, the character being hated in Scream 6, is a direct reference to Melissa Barrera's performance in Scream 5 being hated quite heavily by the fans. I do think it's interesting, and I love the dive into toxic fandoms. That was a really good one. I do think there's a lot that they haven't touched on yet, though, the main one being true crime. I'm surprised that they haven't done this yet. I do think that would be really interesting. I think that we could even get a future Scream entry that kind of takes the format of a documentary, like a true crime documentary about the Woodsboro murders, and go even more meta. You know, I think it could be really good. Okay, so now we're hitting tier 3, underwater. From here on, I don't have names for the tiers, they're just going to be numbered. Scary Movie was the original title. This entry is exactly what it says. The original title for Scream was in fact Scary Movie. It was renamed to be named after a Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson song. Matthew Lillard in Scream 2 and in Scream 2022. This is kind of two entries, but I lumped them into one. Matthew Lillard has made 2 cameos since his death in the first movie. In Scream 2, he's in the background of the college party, very, very briefly. I think he hugs Mickey, and then he's gone. He was asked to cameo in the background because he was already on set because he was dating Neve Campbell at the time. And then his voice was also featured in the 5th entry at the party later on when everybody chants for Wes. Matthew Lillard's in there somewhere. The Weinstein Commentary. As I mentioned, each movie does have some real-world commentary, and in particular, Scream 3 touched on the darker side of Hollywood, portraying John Milton, a Hollywood producer, as an abuser and a rapist who uses his power to coerce young women into bad situations. This actually led to Maureen Prescott becoming pregnant with Sydney's brother, Roman. Scream 3 was released in 2000s, but in 2017 a lot of accusations started coming out about Harvey Weinstein that were very, very, very similar to how John Milton is portrayed in Scream 3. What's crazy about this is that Wes and Kevin did all of this under the Weinstein's nose, as they're both executive producers on the film. It's kind of cornering the Weinsteins, because either they let it go out and it's out in the world, or they cut the movie and they basically admit guilt. Scream 7 AI Theory. As I quickly mentioned earlier, there are some crazy casting announcements for Scream 7, and a lot of the cast that have been announced are characters that are dead. Skeet Ulrich did return in 5 and 6 as a kind of hallucination in Sam's mind, and while I do think that these actors could be coming back in 7 in a similar fashion to that, I think there's so many of them that there's something else going on. So far we have Matthew Lillard, Scott Foley and David Arquette returning and confirmed to be reprising their roles. The most prevalent theory around this is that this movie's killer will actually be using AI to recreate the voices of these dead characters to taunt Sydney, or even creating like videos or anything like that to just kind of mess with Sydney's head. If this is the case, which I do think is fairly likely, I can see all of the killers coming back, especially the ones that are linked more closely to Sydney, like Skeet Ulrich and Emma Roberts. Scream 7 has wrapped, so I don't think we're going to be getting any more announcements, so if these do appear, I think they'll be left as a surprise. If they had just announced Matthew Lillard, I probably would be leaning way more towards the Stu Lives theory, but because they've announced like David Arquette and Scott Foley as well, I do think that the AI theory is probably more likely. Scream 8. So, even though we're still half a year out or so from Scream 7, reports are that Scream 8 is in development. This does suggest that they have a lot of faith in 7 to me. Kevin is coming back to direct, Guy and James are coming back to write. It's the same team essentially, and it could be filmed at the start of 2026, maybe even before Scream 7 comes out. If this is the case, this suggests to me that they have a plan, and we could be getting very frequent entries in the franchise, maybe even one a year until it stops doing well. Gail's bangs. So this is talking about Gail Weathers' bangs in Scream 3. They're very infamous and people love to make fun of these bangs. They're very short, they're probably past the point of baby bangs, and everyone makes so many jokes about them constantly. I personally think they're kind of a serve, but I also do think Amanda's hair in Saw 10 isn't that bad, so what do I know? They were somewhat Courtney Cox's choice as well, as she wanted to kind of reinvent Gail's look for each movie, but apparently the hairstylist did cut them a little bit too short. There's actually a funny interview with Drew Barrymore where Courtney Cox talks about this and how everybody on set was kind of trying to reassure her that the bangs looked okay, but they clearly didn't. Robbie was actually gay. I don't think that there's too much to this one. In the 4th movie, one of the rules is that you can't die if you're gay. It's a play on the bury the gays trope. So when Robbie is about to die, he shouts, "Wait, no, you can't, there's rules, I'm gay." And people took this seriously, apparently. He was obviously just trying to get out of dying though. Dead meat in Scream 2022. This one is self-explanatory, but it's definitely something to be missed if you're only a casual viewer. YouTube personality James Janice and Chelsea Rebecca, known for their YouTube channel Dead Meat, appear in the 5th movie. Richie is watching a YouTube video about the latest Stab movie, under the guise of trying to research to beat the killer, and none other than Chelsea and James are hosting. The channel is called Film Fails, but it's an obvious reference to Dead Meat. This scene is kind of incredible. I love this one. It's very meta. They're just ripping into Stab 8, which is called Stab 2021. They make fun of that, which makes fun of the fact that Scream 5 is called Scream 2022. You know, it's very self-referential. This scene also includes 2 other Easter eggs, which I was thinking about putting as their own entry, but I think I'll just group them in here really quickly. But in the recommended videos, when Richie is watching YouTube, you can see one video that says that Kirby is alive, and you can see another video that's theorizing that Stu Marker is alive. So now we're moving on to tier 4. Scream MTV is Stab. This is referring to the Scream MTV show being Stab, I guess. This just isn't true, as we see Stab in the Scream universe and we know what Stab looks like. We can kind of give it a bit of benefit of the doubt if we kind of view it through the lens of the Scream TV show being like a stand-in for a piece of media that was loosely based on the events of the Woodsboro murders. But even saying that, I feel like I'm really reaching there. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of the TV show, so I'm not as well versed in it as I am with the movies. So if there's actually any evidence for this, just let me know in the comments, but I don't think there is, and I did kind of look into it. Audrey was the original killer. Again, this is referring to the TV show, where Audrey was set up to be the original killer, very similar to the Dewey was supposed to be a killer. By the end of season 2, this is just revealed to be not true. Audrey was set up as a red herring, and there were a few hints, but yeah, as I said, just revealed to be not true. Billy and Stu were gay. This is a really big fan theory amongst the fandom, to be fair. You know, obviously we do have a lot of shippers here and there, you know, but like as a fan theory, this is actually quite prevalent. Honestly, there's not that much evidence for it, but if you read into the subtext, there are quite a few moments in the movie that you could recontextualize into a romantic nature. I think if this was true, it does kind of add some layers to Stu's character, because Billy being like the lead murderer, I think it would mean that Stu was doing it out of love. The jury's still out on this one, and while there's not much evidence, I do just think it's an interesting reading of the text. Scream 4 original ending. The ending that we got for Scream 4 was not actually the original ending that was written. Scream 4 was actually supposed to be the start of a new trilogy, with a story that would carry over on the 5th and 6th entries, with Jill kind of being the center character. The original ending didn't have the hospital scene, and instead kind of ended at the house, and it would have been very open-ended and inconclusive of whether Sydney had died. Jill would be taken into an ambulance, and cameras would swarm around her, and she would be painted as the hero. It was eventually changed because a 5th movie wasn't guaranteed, and the studio wanted a more conclusive ending. I think this was a decent call in the end, because we didn't end up getting the 5th entry for another 11 years. Dewey's got our voices. I left this one in as it was written in the original Iceberg, but I do think it's a misquote. The actual quote is, Dewey, he's got our voices. And I think this is just a reference to Roman Bridges' voice changer. Honestly, it's an absolutely insane piece of tech that just kind of doesn't exist. Having said that, I do think that they could go somewhere similar with this in Scream 7 with the AI theory. Hush. At first, I thought this was referencing the Mike Flanagan movie, but apparently there's a theory out there that the TV show was originally supposed to be called Hush instead of Scream. I've looked into this, there's no evidence, there's nothing kind of pointing towards this, so I do think the creator of the original Iceberg was just kind of saying things. But to put my own little spin on this entry, I will say that the Mike Flanagan movie Hush does feature a similar mask to the TV show. Sexy Ghostface. Now, I have to be careful how I word this because YouTube already hates horror channels, but I really wanted to add this in because it is a little bit silly. But basically, there's a trend among amateur adult entertainers on a particular site, Twitter and another one that is very well known, where they will create content dressed as Ghostface. I've seen a lot of variations on this, and honestly it's kind of hot. I know this happens with a lot of horror characters, but I don't think I've ever seen it as rampant as Ghostface. Noah's comic. So Noah Foster is a character in the Scream TV show, and he has a comic. The comic does depict the events of the killings. Yeah, I think you can see some of it online if you want to like see it as like an actual comic. But yeah, that's all this entry is referring to, I think. Okay, now we're going further down into tier 5. Dr. Orth. Dr. Orth is a character in Scream 4, and he tends to Sydney when she's in the hospital. And this is actually the brother of Stephen Orth, who was Casey's boyfriend in the opening scene of the first movie. In the movie, it's not actually directly stated, but there was a deleted scene where the conversation between the two was extended, where he does actually mention that Steven was his younger brother. The Ghostface costume gives the users power. This is a fan theory that's been around for a long time. It states that whenever you put on the cloak and the mask, you get superhuman powers. Scream, aside from its outlandish commentary and comical edge, is actually a fairly grounded horror movie. You know, it's mostly about people who just kill because they're psychos. There's no kind of supernatural reasoning behind it. There's no ghosts, no possessions, any of that. Just psychos. Having said that, when we do look at Ghostface as kind of like a separate entity, it does seem weird that it tends to have a lot of strength that the average person probably wouldn't have. This leads to a lot of inconsistencies, and there are multiple incidences where things just don't quite add up. The main one being Amber killing Dewey in Scream 5 and lifting Dewey up off of the floor with a knife doesn't quite make sense, because Amber's like a fairly small woman. Suspension of disbelief and all of that, but I do see where this theory spawned from. The only evidence to go against this would be that Ghostface is also quite a clumsy killer. Scream again. Honestly, I couldn't find anything on this entry, at all. So I am just guessing for this one. But maybe this was a proposed title for Scream 2. There was a sci-fi movie from the 70s called Scream and Scream Again, so maybe that's why Scream 2 wasn't called Scream Again. But as I said, I'm literally just guessing here. The series is within the series. This is just another theory that the TV show is a TV show within the universe of the movie franchise. I don't think there's really any evidence for this. I do think this is just speculation, very similar to the TV show is Stab theory. But honestly, it's kind of a missed opportunity, because doing a TV show within the film franchise is the exact kind of meta that spawned the franchise. So yeah, missed opportunity. Alternate logos. For the first movie, there are actually two different logos used in the posters. We have the logo that we now know and love, but there is also another logo with a silhouette of someone running in the A. Harassment over Randy's death. Randy Meeks is a fan favourite character, and for good reason. He's the audience stand-in, he tells us the rules, he views it from the perspective of a film fan, much like the audience. He's very funny and he's very lovable. I think that it's normal that people were upset when he got killed off because he was such a great character, but apparently a few people took it too far and started harassing the creators. Kevin Williamson has said now that he regrets killing off Randy because he would have made a great legacy character, which I kind of fully agree with. However, the twins are iconic, and Martha, cute as hell. The costume and the franchise rights are separate. I think this one's fairly obvious when you know a little bit about the movie, but at surface level you probably wouldn't know this. The Ghostface mask wasn't actually made for the movie. It was made by a company called Funworld, as I previously mentioned, and it was just used in the movie. So the costume from Funworld is actually separate to the rights of the franchise itself. So when a game like Mortal Kombat or Dead by Daylight wants to use Ghostface as a character, they have to kind of get the rights from both sides. I'm not a lawyer, so I think that's a really simple and very, very brief version of it. But yeah, that's kind of the tea. And I do think that it's interesting to note the Ghostface from Funworld and the Ghostface in the movie are very, very slightly different. And it's not in the mask, it's in the cloak. The Funworld cloak has a cinch around it, a little bit of rope to cinch around the waist, and the movie cloak is just like a long flowy cloak, and it's a little bit glittery. So now we're on to tier 6, the real Scream 3. This is actually referring to the fact that the Scream 3 that we got wasn't the original pitch. The original pitch for the movie was actually much crazier. I like Scream 3 a lot, but there is a reason why it's one of the least liked entries. Kevin Williamson has since revealed that the original plan was to have a fan club of Ghostfaces obsessed with Stab 1 and 2, and Sidney would walk into a house full of victims, and one by one they would all stand up and reveal themselves to be this kind of cult of Ghostface. And none other than Stu Macher would be behind it, pulling the strings from prison. Obviously, some of the plot points did kind of get pushed into future entries, like the fame motive and the obsessed fans, but this would have been absolutely insane. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we get something similar to this going forward, even in 7, maybe. The reason that it was changed to the idea of filming Stab 3 in Hollywood was because of Columbine. Horror movies and video games were under massive amounts of scrutiny and blamed for the violence. This led to the studio putting pressure on Williamson to change the script completely, and that's why the third one has a bit of a lighter tone and a bit more of a comedic kind of vibe. They even tried to ask Wes to take the gore out completely, but Wes pushed back, saying that if you took the gore out of a Scream film, it wouldn't be a Scream film. The following is Scream 3. This is jumping off of the last entry a little bit, but in 2013, Kevin Williamson created a TV show called The Following. It stars Kevin Bacon as an FBI agent who is tasked with recapturing a serial killer who has escaped prison with the help of his cult. Apparently, this is an idea that Williamson had even before Scream, but was also inspired by the Gainesville killer, who then inspired Scream. So it kind of all became a bit of a melting pot for this TV show by the seam of it. And I do think that Kevin Williamson maybe used this show to maybe pursue some of the stuff that he couldn't do in Scream. Scream 3 second killer theory. So another Scream 3 theory, and honestly, this one might as well be confirmed. There is no doubt in my mind that this isn't actually the case, and we do have a lot of evidence for it. The only evidence against this theory is that they don't explicitly state it in the movie, but the theory goes that Angelina Tyler was the second Ghostface killer in Scream and was Roman's accomplice. This is actually confirmed to be true in the original draft of the script, where there's a scene revealing at the final act that Angelina was Roman's accomplice. And while that scene was actually cut, a lot of the context and the hints were still in the movie. They could be red herrings, as we never get the confirmation in the movie, but it's pretty damning, along with her ambiguous death scene where she kind of gets stabbed in the shoulder and then like dragged off. I think the only thing that you could use to argue against this theory is that in Scream 6, Kirby explicitly states that Roman was working alone, but if Angelina Tyler was his accomplice in Scream 3, and no one knew about it, and she got away with it, and she faked her death, then no one would know that she was working with Roman to this day, and the FBI still wouldn't know, and Kirby wouldn't know. So, you know, she would think that Roman was working alone. You can dive deeper into this theory, but it's pretty damning, and honestly, to me, this is all but confirmed. What happened to Joel? This is an interesting one because Joel was Gale's cameraman in Scream 2. He's a great addition to the cast. He's a really good character. This entry is asking what happened to him, but just watch the movie. He actually was really smart and he made the correct decision to run as far away from the situation as he could. He, throughout the movie, constantly tries to tell Gale that things are getting increasingly more dangerous and he's not comfortable being in the situation. He doesn't want to end up like her first cameraman from Scream 1, and eventually he tells her that he's leaving, and then he walks away from her, and that's it. That's the end of his story. I don't know why there would be any kind of ambiguity to his character or his story, because it's very clearly stated that he just leaves. The contract says that Kirby lives. So this one's a little bit dated because obviously we have Scream 6 now that confirms Kirby to be alive. But I do think it's an interesting little bit of information that when Hayden Panettiere joined the cast of Scream 4, in her contract there was a no-kill clause, which is why her kill was left open-ended and why she was able to return to Scream 6. This is the last but one. We are almost at the bottom, so let's move on to tier 7. Scream MTV Third Killer. This is referring to the third killer in the Scream MTV show that never actually got revealed on screen before its cancellation. The main suspects are Kevin, Troy, or a brand new character that we never met. Kevin Patrick Walls auditioned for Billy. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Kevin Patrick Walls played Casey's boyfriend, Stephen Orth, and apparently he originally auditioned for Billy, but obviously that went to Skeet Ulrich. Scream 4 alternate cuts aren't real. I do think that this is referring to the fact that there's an alternative opening and an alternative ending to Scream 4, leading some people to maybe believe that there was a completely different cut of this available somewhere. This isn't true, there's no alternate cuts, there's just deleted scenes and script changes, but you can go and view the alternate opening. It's actually a lot darker than what the opening that we got, but yeah, it's pretty good. Scarecrow Ghostface. This is a crazy one that I kind of wanted to add, but there is actually a design available for the Scarecrow Ghostface costume. Allegedly, this was a design cut from Scream 4, and it was supposed to be used by one of the killers during the Stabathon scene at the bar. I think that this looks really great. I would have loved to have seen it on screen, but you know, yeah. I believe that this costume is still actually available to purchase from Funworld. Scream MTV TV show season 4. The TV show got cancelled after season 3, so there won't be any season 4. But I'm assuming that this is referring to any kind of plans that they had. After the second season, they did reboot the TV show to Scream Resurrection. And apparently, at the end of season 3, it was supposed to cut to them on set filming the show. And season 4 was actually going to be a meta story where a Ghostface was haunting the cast of the TV show and the cast of the franchise, and it would kind of unite the two in this one story. Very New Nightmare, very, very similar to New Nightmare. Honestly, I don't think the TV show was good enough to kind of carry on, but it sounds interesting. The Stab movies are real. Honestly, I don't know what this entry is trying to say. I don't know if this is a fan theory or not, but they clearly aren't real, and they're just movies within the universe of the franchise. There are currently 8 Stab films, none of which we have seen enough footage of to put together an actual Stab film to watch. So yeah, Stab films aren't real, they're just an in-universe film. There are some threads out there on various websites where people kind of roleplay as if the Stab films were real and critique them. It's actually pretty funny. Okay, so now we're on the ocean floor. This is the bottom tier, the most obscure stuff. The leather boots aren't real. The only thing that I can think that this is referring to is that it's actually really hard to find the same boots that they wear in the movie. When researching for this, I came across multiple threads of cosplayers trying to find an exact match for the movie worn shoes, but no one can really place it. I think most people assume them to be Doc Martens, but no one can really find an exact match. I think that's it really. Scream 2 gore cut. I think this is referring to 2 scenes that were cut from Scream 2. Randy, in his original death scene, had his throat slit, and Phil, in the opening scene, got stabbed in the ear multiple times. I don't really know if this warrants an entry, and especially an entry this far down, but it's here. At first I thought that it might be referring to a cut of Scream 2 that got rejected for being too gory, that might be out there somewhere. But no, the original cut that they sent and submitted in went through as an R rating with no problems. Scream original posters weirdness. Now this is a really fun one and a bit of a strange one, But the more you look at the original Scream posters, the weirder it gets. The main thing that people notice mostly is that Skeet Ulrich is sporting facial hair, which he never has in the movie, like at all. And if you look further, you can clearly see they're using the same head model, but just pasting the faces on the different heads. They all have the same hairline. It's really weird. I'll put examples up on screen right now. But yeah, it's a poster that the more you look at, the weirder it gets. Real life Ghostface crimes. So this is referring to real life Ghostface crimes. So unfortunately there has been a few copycat killings inspired by the film. As I said with the Gainesville Ripper, I don't want to give too much time to actual crime because it's just not my thing. I don't like doing it. But you can kind of go find that information for yourself if you like. It's not too hard to find. But I also do think that it is interesting to note the cyclical nature of being inspired by a film that is talking about people being inspired by films. I'll leave it there. So at the final entry now, and I've kept a big one for the finale, this is the Judy Jurgenstern twin theory. Now, this is our final entry and most obscure because I believe that only like 2 or 3 people know about this theory. One is me, and the other is the creator of the theory, my good friend Riley. Riley has come up with an absolute batshit theory that exists only to make Parker Posey's return to the franchise viable. When this channel was still in its infancy, I actually filmed a video with Riley talking about Scream 7 and our thoughts on everything and theories. And one that Riley kind of went off the rails with was the Judy Jurgenstern twin theory. I actually couldn't finish that video due to some of the files being corrupted, but I have managed to dig out his monologue with this theory, so I'm going to play it right now.
Also in Scream 3, there happened to be a character who I believe meant a lot to all of us. She was with us for a short time, not a long time, but she occasionally went by the name of Jennifer Jolie. Born Judy Jurgenstern. Judy Jurgenstern dreamed of becoming an actress. She moved to Hollywood. She started her walk at the Hollywood Walk of Fame in TV shows and movies, and then she got the role of Gail Weathers in the Stab film series. Now, growing up, Judy also happened to have a sister, Gillian. Now, Gillian wasn't like Judy. Gillian didn't want to be an actress. She didn't like playing characters. She knew who she was, and who she was a fierce, incredible, talented woman who would lead her own talk show through the years. Somewhat like an Oprah Winfrey style talk show, which would have guests and a studio audience, and the world would love her. Crucial little fact about this was that Judy and Gillian were actual twins. Now the miraculous link to that is that means that Parker Posey, who played Jennifer Jolie, who unjustly died due to Dewey's ineptitude with a gun, could come back to the series as Gillian Jurgenstern, the Oprah Winfrey of the Scream world, and have a whole other rivalry with Gail Weathers that we lost due to losing Jennifer / Judy. So I think that we could get Parker Posey back in Scream 7 or 8 as Gillian Jurgenstern.
And there we have it. We have made it through an entire iceberg. That was a lot of information. I hope that you found it interesting. I hope that you found at least some of it new information to you. And even if there weren't, even if you knew everything, then I hope that it was at least relaxing for you and a nice watch. If there's any other franchises or topics that you want me to cover in an iceberg format, let me know in the comments and I will look into doing that. As I said in the intro though, I do think icebergs maybe have slipped in popularity a little bit, so maybe doing other franchises might be better in other formats. Though I really did enjoy updating this one for Scream. I think that it was really fun, you know, kind of going through all the bits of information that were there before and then adding my own as well. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Remember to drop a comment, subscribe, all of that really helps the channel out, and I will see you in the next one.